Hey everyone, I'm just going to be waiting here for Josh to sign on. Um, how's everybody doing? How's HTC going so far for everyone? By the way, I'm Tom McCauley. I'm the digital content production manager for AIM. And oh, good joy. I'm doing excellent. I'm excited to see how this virtual conference is being pulled off. It's a first for us. It's a first for me. Has anybody been to HTC before? Or is this your first time? Thank you. That's awesome. Cool. So what are people most interested about hearing about today in Josh's talk? I think it's going to be pretty cool. Josh is a very visionary kind of guy. Sometimes when I'm more of like a journalist writer kind of person. I write for Silicon Prairie News and I make videos and stuff for AIM. And I have an interest in technology and coding, but I know so little about it. So when I'm talking with Josh, I'm just like trying to hang on because he's very intelligent when it comes to machine learning and AI and everything. He's also a venture capitalist, which is cool. But yeah, it should be a good talk. Josh, if you just want to share your, ask to share your video and audio. Oh, Unite Nebraska, nice. How's it going, Josh?
Hello, how you doing?
Good.
Awesome.
Why don't we give people about 5 more minutes because it technically starts at 3:15.
Sure.
But I was just talking about how so you're chief data scientist of the Wyoming Research Institute, which works on digital transformation for underserved communities. How long have you all been around?
I launched this year after dealing with the investment space and realizing that, my focus is advancing science and research. And unfortunately, as much as we all want to deal with the latest and greatest technology, there's a lot of impact that's not being driven through it. So you look at all the great things that exist in the world from, all these different things from AI, blockchain, smart cars, smart cities, all these different buzzwords, but when you quantify the value of if it's helping everyday people get, better in their lives or increasing their, day-to-day, quality of life or who serves them, it doesn't. So this is where we come in to help large and mid-sized stakeholders that deal with the end user, which is the community. And this is like governments, healthcare organizations, education systems, so on and so forth. If you look at everyone going virtual, this is a prime example of what didn't happen, which was they didn't use the latest and greatest technology. They just try to find a way to put a Band-Aid on having to deal with remote schooling, which didn't solve the problem, right? So that's an example of how we come in to help stakeholders make better decisions and utilize, the latest and greatest.
Yeah. For anybody just joining us, we're still waiting until about 4:15 to get started. So we're just kind of talking back and forth. I published an article that Silicon Prairie News wrote about Joshua. It's I'm biased because I wrote it, but I think it's pretty good. Josh has had an interesting life and he's working on a lot of really cool projects.
Yeah, definitely. Appreciate the support and happy to be here.
Awesome. So Joy, what does Unite Nebraska do? A social determinant platform? Huh. I wonder if you could say a little more about that, Joy. I'm putting Joy on the spot. But connects health system with CBOs to create a feedback loop for care. Oh, cool. Did you happen to see Atif Farid's presentation about AI in healthcare, Joy? Oh, nice. Thanks for the link. All those meetings. Okay. I feel like we have. Whoa! I'm hearing my voice. I think I'm hearing my voice coming through Josh's. That's okay. That's kind of cool. No, I'm hearing
voice?
I think I'm hearing my voice come through your like speakers, but I have like these really nice studio headphones. They're these open back things I use for mixing, and they can pick up things that I would never hear like normally. So, yeah. Anyway, it's 4:15. Why don't we get started? Like I said, I'm Tom McCauley, Digital Content Production Manager of the AIM Institute. I'm introducing Joshua Armah, who's a very talented venture capitalist and chief data scientist for the Wyasi Research Institute. They work on digital transformation for underserved communities. They have partnerships with nonprofits, and they work on like building the tech ecosystem and the startup ecosystem, especially for historically underserved populations. So, but Joshua's going to talk about cognitive AI for social impact. So I'm really excited to hear about that, and I'll let you take it away, Joshua. I think you're muted, by the way.
Anyways, before I share my screen and get the presentation, I want to take like maybe 5 minutes just to give a high level on what is the difference between cognitive science and cognitive computing with the respect to artificial intelligence. And the main difference between the two is that cognitive social impact is basically creating anything that makes. So big discrepancies with artificial intelligence is where are we today versus where is the world going? I'm not going to talk about the history of AI, but I will lightly share a couple points on where the world is currently and where it's going. So for those that know and for those that don't know, essentially AI has been a buzzword for a long time. Not so long ago, in the 1900s, in the 20th century, essentially, what happened was that, we had a lot of different, people come through, and some of these people represent stakeholders like Frank Rosenblatt or Jeffrey Hinton. But the key measurement of this was something called the Turing test. And Alan Turing basically created a Turing test to identify if machines could outproduce a human being. And this is a way for essentially a human to assess whether a machine was smart enough to handle, automated or repetitive tasks. And at the time, artificial intelligence was just a broader concept, whereas though the Turing test is really what made us have laptops today or mobile phones. Essentially, we use software as a platform, and the platform works on its own, and all we have to do is essentially use the technology and benefit from it. Devices like an iPhone, and when iPhone, if you have one, you have tools like Siri, you have things like your notes, you have your iCloud account, which stores all your data. You have a number of things that essentially benefit you as a user of Apple products. So they've bundled various technologies into an end product, which is the iPhone. The iPhone contains the software, and we're able to utilize this software for our advantage. Now, in the standpoint of how does this better humanity? How do we create stuff that helps everyday people? Well, there's some things that exist in the world of AI. One of the concepts is called deep learning. Deep learning is a way to train neural networks with big data. The concept of a neural network was to simulate the human brain on a computer and train it with data. Now, for a lot of you may have heard of machine learning. Machine learning and deep learning are not the same. And the concept of machine learning is more around getting a statistical output. That means that basically you train a data set, you use it for predictive analytics, You can use it for sentiment analysis. It really helps you with analytics. The point of machine learning is that it's supervised. It's something that essentially we would, the human being is in the process, and they're creating a bias. The bias in a machine learning algorithm is that the person that created it has specific things that they wanted to do with the data, and when they trained the machine learning model, it was supposed to help them with a specific problem. So, for instance, let's say a large corporation in Omaha, wants to train a machine learning model. They may focus on their enterprise challenges, their specific business or industry issues. Whereas though for deep learning, we actually want to solve a broader set of problems. And some of these things could be like computer vision, which is recognizing images and what is in the image. This is what Tesla does to create self-driving cars and autonomy. They're able to train the Tesla operating system on a lot of different information. Sorry, hold on one second. I got. So one of the key concepts that a lot of people have been exposed to, whereas deep learning is the broader concept. Tesla is an example of that, and we can essentially say that Tesla has created a lot of value with that. So what I want to do real quick is I want to basically walk you all through a quick example, and more so I want to kind of talk to you all about what can we expect in the world of cognitive computing. And basically some of the stuff that we're going to talk about will represent things that are relevant to social impact. So there's a lot of nonprofits, for instance, that don't have a big budget, and they're basically in need of this same technology. When you look at companies like Tesla or Google or Microsoft and so on and so forth, they have scaled and they have the budget to handle the technology that they're using. Whereas though nonprofits and smaller stakeholders are in need of these solutions as well, but cannot always pay the cost to deal with them. So, with that being said, I want to kind of, walk through some of these quick examples. But what I'm going to do is start with a brief presentation on, essentially what we can expect from the cognitive computing world. And the world of cognitive computing can really be represented by IBM Watson. Watson was a invention by IBM, and with that invention, Watson became somewhat of a go-to for using machine learning and cognitive computing in the same world. And the focus of this is, instead of replacing human beings, we want to create smarter technology for people to work with. So, for instance, like a virtual assistant, something that you can ask questions and it can get results, like scheduling meetings on your calendar. This helps you to become more efficient with your time. This is a basic concept of cognitive computing that represents, assisting human beings with the tasks that are more repetitive and less, intelligent. So for us as human beings, we want to work on the smartest stuff versus just working on anything. And with that being said, we can definitely, look at some examples of this as I begin to speak on my screen, and basically go from there. So real quick, just give me 1 second. Sorry, share my screen. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to share my screen now. So we're essentially going to get started with a quick, table of contents. I'm going to speak, specifically around social impact, some use cases, and then tools and frameworks that can be used. So to start with a quick quote, Elon Musk has shared that AI doesn't have to be evil to destroy humanity. If AI has a good and humanity just happens in the way, it will destroy humanity as a matter of course without even thinking about it. No hard feelings. So if AI has a goal and humanity just happens to get in the way, that was a little typo, it basically will destroy humanity as a matter of course without even thinking about it. No hard feelings. The reason for this is that AI doesn't have the reasoning skills human beings have when it comes to emotional intelligence. So us as emotional creatures, we can react and respond to things, and sometimes we may take it personally. Like for instance, you may be late to work multiple times during the day, during the week, and then your boss ends up, letting you go. You may have to deal with the emotional side of that. You may send an email to your boss like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be late, it will never happen again. Your boss come back to work. For AI specifically, does not think of all these variables. It really is trained to understand the rules and the system. So for instance, the AI would just penalize you and not think to care about your personal situation, because the sentiment and emotional intelligence is not something that AI has out the box. And a lot of AI, or computers, I should say, are really just programs, right? And for some, we are dealing with AI when it comes to our work environment or even with our everyday technology, but we don't know that we're using it. So AI for Good by Google is something that was set up, and it's basically this whole presentation, I'm going to really focus on Google. There's a lot of AI in the world, but for the most part, you want to deal with AI that is essentially going to be easy to use. So AI, really has helped Google do a lot, and they have something that essentially is like a guide for nonprofits and social enterprises to learn how to apply artificial intelligence and machine learning to social, humanitarian, and environmental challenges. So we're going to talk about, the two tools that we'll be going through today. One is Dialogflow and the other is TensorFlow. I'm going to start with Dialogflow. So basically, Dialogflow is something that you can essentially use out the box. Here, I already have something set up, but I'm going to just walk you through the process again to show you a little bit about how this works. So Dialogflow is for chatbots or for chat assistants. And essentially, you can just, create a project on Google, and then they have these pre-built agents. So let's say you want to create a technology out the box and not deal with it for whatever reason, and more so focus on why you're using it. So for instance, a lot of organizations have to deal with making payments or dealing with payment arrangements. So for instance, people are getting evicted right now, right? So Google has created these pre-built bots that are able to set up arrangements for landlords or other types of stakeholders to deal with them. As you can see, it has a flow chart and an end of the flow. So to talk about this, we're going to quickly test this. And the way we're going to do it is I'm going to essentially ask the agent a question. So as you can see, it says, hi, I'm the virtual payment arrangement agent. I can help you set up a payment extension and arrangement. How can I assist you today? Due to COVID-19. So I'm so sorry to hear that you have been impacted by COVID-19. Please allow me to offer you some solutions. You have two options to help you pay your bill this month. The first is a payment arrangement, which will allow you to split the total into two payments. The second option is to extend your payments date. So for most people, they want to split up their payments. So for those that already know, hey, you lost your job, you obviously can't make the payment as you can. So we're going to request a payment arrangement. Up your payment arrangement. To know that it is now going through a decision process where it's routing me to what it wants me to do. So I selected the type, and based on the type, it's going to either extend the payment or set up a new payment arrangement. Since I clicked on payment arrangement, this is where we are in the flow. So first, basically, I can put this. I'll put, for instance, $500 on October 1st. Okay. And then I'll put 225 on November 1st. So I actually made a little mistake. I was supposed to put the date there, but I'm just kind of going through this. So the second one we'll put November 1st, and then put 225. So just kind of as I'm going through this is like the template itself. As you can see, it's out the box, just giving me logic. I didn't program anything. I didn't do anything. I'm just working with what Google gave me out the box. So what Dialog represents as a tool is something that you can use to train your own system, and essentially you can edit different parts of it. So for instance, if I want to change the intent, I can go in here and change the intent. But what you're seeing is essentially this technology is no code. So there's a lot of no code or low code platforms where you don't have to deal with all of the different programming in Python, for instance, or working with the technology. You can actually just go into the dashboard and work with the technology and then put in your rules. Intent is something that we want something to happen, basically. So for this example, you know, our whole point was to get to a point where the agent could give us a result. Let's say I'm a landlord. I need this tenant to pay me the money owed on the property that I'm renting them. They may be 2 to 3 months behind. They want to set up a payment arrangement, and this walks me through as a user, which I just demonstrated, walking through a new payment arrangement to split the payments into 2 portions on 2 different dates, and then I confirm it, and then it ends the flow. This would eliminate a landlord having to hire a collection agency or having to deal with it manually. Like for instance, if I have like, you know, let's say 15 tenants and I have to deal with, you know, multiple properties, I don't have time to manage all of that. So if I work with a chat assistant, it can help me to help my tenants not get evicted, but also help me understand when they're going to pay what's owed to me. So that's one example of, you know, using AI for social impact. Why is this important? Because business has to go on. In the world of technology, you know, technology is created to really help businesses. And when you look at the other side of technology, when it comes to working with stakeholders and being able to, you know, deal with the problems at hand, we also have something that is more important, which is dealing with the neural networks. So I'm on a playground by TensorFlow. This is the second demo. This demo really just represents what does it look like for a neural network to be trained. So basically, on one side, you have the chatbot, like something like this, but you actually can do a lot more with it. And without getting into too much of the specifics, what I will share with you is that if you want to work with a test case, you can set up your entities. The entities means like money, for instance. So in this scenario, we wanted money to be an entity. In another scenario, I could put rents, right? Or I could create one and put rent and then make it an entity only. And then basically what I'm doing is the rent could mean something specific. Like if I want to make the rents mean like something as in a lease, so that I know that the rent I'm talking about means something related to the tenant that leased a property from me. And then when I save that, you know, it'll be in here. Now it's rent instead of money. So the point I'm making is you can program a chatbot to do a number of things. And then when you work with it, you want to also see the analytics, right? So you want to see how many conversations it has. You want to be able to validate it. All of these things that are important for machine learning. Now, on the other side of a neural network, when you train a neural network, you typically are looking to do pattern recognition. So this is an example that anybody can work with. Both of these are accessible. So, you know, I'll post these links in the chat. But basically, when you train a neural network, the whole idea is that you're feeding data into what we call layers. And the layers are similar to our brains, where we have, you know, neurons that fire off and send information to and receive information. So when training data, to keep this simple, most important concept of neural networks is that because of computing power, we can actually increase the learning rate. So for instance, if I increase the learning rate to 10, you can see that it's moving a lot faster. That means that basically I'm able to train a neural network. I can add neurons. These neurons are complex math functions. And essentially the activation, there's a few different activations. These are all based on linear algebra. The Rayleigh function is something that's very common and is used for you know, pattern recognition and also in categorizing data. So for instance, if this was let's say the orange represents people that don't pay the rent on time versus the blue representing people that do, we can essentially assess a couple different things. And the way we do that is by training neural network. But in order to do that, we also need to maybe sometimes increase the amount of neurons that is able to give us an output. The reason this is important is because when we go through this, we're trying to classify the data. So for instance, I just made an example of, let's imagine the orange is the people that have not paid rent, and the blue is the people that have agreed to pay rent based on that chat assistant I just described. We would essentially be able to model the data. Now, for whatever reason, we may have, sometimes it takes a long time to train data. So as you can see, it's moving very slow, right? So what we want to try to figure out is how can we what's called optimize the neural network. So typically you would start with one layer. A lot of people start with multiple layers, but for the most part, we want to maybe start with one layer in this example, and then basically we'll create a learning rate that reflects that. And then basically what we'll get is we'll get the pattern really out the box. Because why? We're able to simplify the neural network. And for those of you that are just trying to understand what is happening, we're basically choosing a data set and we're trying to examine our data set with analytics. So a neural network is something that you do program and that you do write code to do. So the idea of TensorFlow is that if you go and look for TensorFlow on the web, you can actually deal with it yourself. And then basically it's a open source framework for using machine learning. And basically it has all the tools out the box to work with it. And what is the benefit of this? This means basically that if you want to learn how to code and use machine learning, you can leverage it for what you needed to do. So going back to the point, a very common use case could be something that I just mentioned, which was, how can we essentially, work with a neural network, but also how can we work with the chat agent? This virtual assistant is set up to make sure that we can essentially utilize the overall, environment correctly. So I'm gonna take a stop here. I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll, take any questions that may come up. These things are really relevant if you want to learn more about AI. Again, social impact is not always about trying to solve poverty issues or solving problems that are related to like homelessness, food shortages, or things out the box. It's really about how do you make the world more efficient. So an example I described today, in COVID, a lot of people are missing rent payments, that they're at risk of getting evicted. And if landlords use technology to maybe make a payment arrangement with their tenants with a chat assistant, something that you can create a text message process for, where someone texts this agent and it responds automatically, it can alleviate the stress from worrying about when your tenants will be able to pay if you're a landlord. But for the tenants, it gives them a way to be transparent and open with their landlords so that they don't have to deal with the ramifications. Now, on the database side, there's a lot of opportunity when you're dealing with an environment like that. Let's say you want to help tenants and landlords in the whole state of Nebraska, and you have, let's say, 30,000 different people, and you have 1,000 landlords that represent 20,000 tenants, right? If you are giving them a system to holistically deal with that process, you can measure the data from what's happening, whether people are agreeing to a new payment arrangement or whether they are not. So the landlords can, one, make sure they take care of their property taxes, mortgages, and everything, and then tenants make sure that they catch up to their late rent. The reason that's important is because on the flip side, if landlords don't pay the mortgage on a property and they're leasing it to others, if that house gets foreclosed on, the tenant will have to leave anyway. So the problem of people not paying rent is a little bit more deeper than just them missing out on rent payments. On the other side, it's also about landlords pay for the property, including the certificate of occupancy. This right here can represent a major problem, as there's been about 40 million people facing eviction because of COVID, that may be worth solving with cognitive technology, right? That's the social impact. So I just wanted to define what I mean by social impact so everyone can kind of be clear, so that there's all types of understandings. But in this scenario, we talked about evictions and tenants and using Google technology to drive adoption. So I'll stop there. Tom, any thoughts or feedback?
No, that was great. I guess what's on the horizon for YASI?
So
Wyase.
Wyase is essentially a Ghanaian word for world. So basically, it's Twi for Earth. So with Wyase, what we're focusing on is like how I just mentioned this. Google already has something AI for social good, so it allows technology to be low cost or damn near free for nonprofits and social enterprises. So we're helping to match make organizations with technology like this, and then we help them learn how to measure their data. So for instance, let's say you don't have any data or you think you don't have any data. Well, the good thing is that the world is full of data. You just have to find it. So data collection is a process. A lot of organizations, they might do their own surveys and they may create like these very intense, Excel sheets, or they may work with very long PDF reports that they give to their donors. What we are trying to help them do is create real-time analysis with things that are really relevant to the problems they're solving. So for instance, with workforce development agencies, they would really care about unemployment numbers because they're trying to solve the problem of giving resources to people without them having to come visit them in person.
Right.
So for instance, building a chat assistant, like I just showed you, if you have people that wanted a job text a number and they responded to an assistant, it can serve more people than all the people at the workforce development agency combined. And it can deal with scale. So that's what we're helping people learn how to do, is how to automate the human processes that not only create inefficiencies, but hurt the ability for people to get the value of what they give, which in that case, it'd be finding a job if you're a workforce development agency. So what we all say, we're really focused on, government and nonprofit agencies and organizations that are in need of training and help so that we can give them big opportunities with low cost solutions.
Cool.
Let's management and driving value vibration.
Okay, looks like Harry says, given the many advantages for social improvements using cognitive AI to help, is there an opportunity for them to provide services to access AI to bring about that change to the masses?
So, to clarify, when you say, is there an opportunity to provide services, do you mean the organizations that are able to take advantage of it, or does it mean for individuals?
I'm not sure, Harry. For individuals.
Okay, thank you. Okay, yeah. So for individuals, yes, there's a massive opportunity for individuals to provide services, in the sense that you can identify what is in the community that we call narrow focuses, like narrow verticals. So narrow AI typically is very good at one thing, and narrow AI can be utilized to drive value to those with the like communities. A lot are used to using computers, right? They're not used to downloading apps. And he mentioned in those without access to IT or tech manpower, the most simplest thing to do is voice and text, because voice AI is really about being able to create something that solves a problem and is able to get it to where it needs to go. So for instance, remember fax machines, right? That was an evolutionary technology, faxing something to somebody. Well, now you can actually pick up the phone. If you, as a provider, want to create a voice-enabled assistant, you can do that for people. And then with that, the person can speak to the AI agent over the phone. And right now, we're kind of used to it. Like when you call your bank, you actually don't talk to a human being first. When you call most places, it's actually an automated system. Mm-hmm. Taking that a step further, you can actually program an assistant that would be able to do things that are of value. For instance, trying to help senior citizens find transportation resources and schedule maybe their doctor appointment. That AI agent can handle all of that via the phone. So the one good thing about AI is that we can tie it to older technologies such as telephones and even newer technologies like text messaging, and make it accessible for people that don't necessarily utilize tech like apps or laptops and things of that nature. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of opportunities to provide change. And there's like right now the aging population, and what I mean by that is senior citizens, they're the ones that we can service the most. So typically it's really good to look at them as a good user base to go after if you want to create solutions for a population in need without the technology to deal with it. Awesome.
Any other questions? If people want to get a hold of you, how can they do that?
So basically, the best way to get a hold of me is by email. I'll just put my email in the chat real quick. You can also just look up my name, Joshua Armah, on any platform, and you'll see me LinkedIn specifically. And yes, I think when it comes down to driving value, large corporations that have big budgets are working in silos, and I'm happy to drive value for people that need it. And what that means is that we need to create accessible information that lives outside of the enterprise environment. So for us, as people interested in driving value to others, we may want to drive value that is accessible and obtainable and digestible, not things that are just moonshots or out of here. So yeah.
And then to clarify, Jessica Paragon, Dialogflow is a Google product, so you can use it.
Yeah, anyone can use it. Anyone can use it. That's why I shared it. It's accessible to the world. And then Harry asked, "What's the next big thing? Especially the new upcoming generations are more tech savvy. What is the on horizon for them?" So quantum computing. This is another topic that we don't have time to get into. Is a phenomenon that's coming online, and the idea of quantum computing is that it's going to work in a system that is not a binary system. Basically, what I mean is that right now, all technology is built on zeros and ones. Think of it as true and false. So when we look at computers, they're actually programmed with a binary system that has logarithmic, algebra and other types of discrete mathematics applied to it. So that basically, when people work with this, a binary system, you have to deal with linear algebra and other types of subjects in the discrete mathematics fold to deal with it. Quantum computing takes it to a whole new level where we need new math to work with this stuff. I want to get students to learn type variable calculus. That specifically is a subject matter that's going to be valuable not just in the future, but right now. And as AI is adopted, quantum computing, which you can do your research on, will basically give it the computing power to become a artificial general intelligence. So right now we have like narrow general intelligence, which is like AI that's very good at like one thing. But if you try to take like an AI that's like good at playing a chess game and make it good for like surfing, it just won't happen. It doesn't have the cognitive reasoning to decipher both environments. But if you want to take, for instance, artificial general intelligence, that's more like Siri and what IBM Watson. That's what they're trying to actually accomplish. They're training one neural network, or like essentially one massive system with millions of people every day. So if you think about all the people that use Siri, every day Siri is learning from all these people that use it. And as it becomes more widely adopted in our technology advances, especially with quantum computing, have a need for knowledge workers. So basically what I'm saying is, as the world evolves with artificial general intelligence, which may not be for another 10 or 20 years, if not more, we will basically see an adoption where hard work is meaningless. Meaning it's no longer important to work as hard as you thought you needed to, because we have robotics, computers, and intelligence to do that for us. Whereas though what we're going to focus on is knowledge work. Some of this may represent, business analysts as knowledge workers, software engineers as knowledge workers, data scientists as knowledge workers, and even, for the lack of a better word, project management. Project management will transform a lot. So if you're like right now a teacher and you are used to using a curriculum, in the future you may be used to learning how to help your students versus giving them the curriculum. Let's say an AI gives the curriculum and your job is to be a supportive resource that learns your students' learning styles. And you provide resources like project management, like you're going to do this learning project to increase your learning appetite, versus you're failing class because you've done the projects, but you need support in a more guided way. This is where teachers' time will be better spent, right? So the way we teach and learn will become essentially very more improved, and that's the goal. So for young people, I see them as the key stakeholders in connecting what will become versus what is today.
Nice. Any other questions? Otherwise, I'm just kind of personally curious. You mentioned quantum computing, and I understand there's a lot of obstacles to that. One of them being, namely, that it's called quantum decoherence, where, like, you know, if you observe a particle, just the act of observing the particle changes it, unless you isolate it from the environment. But then if you isolate it from the environment, how do you access it and, you know, and use it in a computer? It sounds like one of those intractable problems that can't be solved.
Yeah.
But I mean, if it could be solved, that'd be incredible. This is a little bit outside of the scope of what your presentation, but I'm curious.
Yeah, I think with quantum mechanics and quantum physics, it answers a lot of the questions that, like, obviously quantum physicists have a lot more of the answers when it comes to the barriers of quantum computing and how it works. But from a standpoint of solely computing, like how we can measure this as a valuable opportunity is basically through two steps. One is a superposition, and the second is entanglement. And basically what I mean by that is that right now, quantum computers, IBM created the first quantum computer that we can actually say is a business commercially available. There's only one to their knowledge, or at least to their claim. And what that represents is just the ability to work with states. And the idea of states is that us as human beings, we're used to things being true or false, right? So that means, like, this is the present, true. It's not the past, true. Is the future the past, false, right? But history can repeat itself. That's a mental example. Quantum computing has the ability to exist with the sense that when you measure a qubit, it essentially is the way. So right now we use bytes, you know, like megabytes, kilobytes, gigabytes, terabytes to measure data. Okay, there's something called a qubit, and a qubit is essentially, just to keep this simple, it can exist in two states at the same time. So it can be also true and false.
I'm just clarifying that qubit, that's how it's spelled, because there's like the other form of the word.
Right. So basically, it can exist in two domains at the same time. That means essentially it's time hopping.
Wow.
So it doesn't exist in any specific state. It's able to time hop. So there's a lot of high-level concepts around this. I cannot explain all of it to you right now, but just understand that the basis of it is that we're on a binary system where a state is either true or false, or a qubit false. They have essentially like a parallel. And there's a whole concept on that quickly I'll put maybe computing. I'm gonna put a white paper in this chat for those that want to look at it and understand it better. This is probably one of the best white papers I know on the subject, which was a very important discussion. Is at a symposium. So you can check that out. It really breaks it down a lot further than I can at the moment. But just understand the reason we're going to quantum computing is because our computing power right now is still limited. And in order to realize the next generation of technology, we have to increase our computing power. And one of the things that was advantageous to this was something called Moore's Law, right? The idea of Moore's Law is that, basically, you can increase the amount of processing with transistors on a microchip, and every 2 years it doubles. So basically every 2 years, the amount of processing power you have doubles, and the cost of computers is cheaper. That basically means over the years, as we've been able to process more data and work with, more transistors on microchips, the cost to deal with computing has essentially went to very low numbers. Where like the cloud computing, like Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, makes everything affordable. Before, when a tech company wanted to have its own infrastructure, it couldn't use a cloud. It would just buy a data center or build its own data center. Now you don't need to do that, where you can just essentially license stuff from the cloud. You can rent your space and you don't have to pay for it. And Moore's Law was the main thing that was, being challenged now. And I'm not going to give you the other side of this, but just understand that Moore's Law was one of the challenges that, we had to be prepared for, that essentially at some point it's going to end. And we're going to enter a state where, even though computing power is cheaper, we don't have the computing power necessary to do the next generation of technology. And that's what we're in right now.
Wow. Cool. So any other questions? If not, do you have anything else you'd like to say, Joshua?
No, I would just say that for those of you paying attention, please use your resources as a steward and be mindful that we live in a world that Mark Benioff shared best, is that big corporations can no longer measure value through shareholder capitalism, meaning you can no longer just focus on what shareholder wants and need stakeholder capitalism. And stakeholder capitalism includes everyone that's involved, from customers to vendors to suppliers to employees to executives to shareholders as well. And stakeholder capitalism is really what's going to drive the world forward. And I would just say that for everyone, paying attention, definitely be a steward of resources so that you can drive value in your community to help the stakeholders you deal with as a steward.
Cool.
Yeah.
And you said that was a quote from Mark Benioff.
Well, it's a theme of what has made Salesforce successful, and that's because they utilize stakeholder capitalism. The concept has existed for a long time. It's just that now, more recently, more corporations are understanding that you can no longer just help and also keep, and you have to take care of your stakeholder ecosystem. Cool. Something that we focus on at WeAsa, tidbit.
Yeah, I just put those in the chat because, I didn't know that. And the teacher inside me has to come out and share the information.
Sure.
Anyway, if there's
awesome.
If there are no more questions, then I guess we still have 5 minutes left. But if you wanted to end early, I mean, it's up to you.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm happy to say we did a great job, and I hope that everyone here was able to take advantage of this talk. And no need to keep anybody. I think there's a lot of other breakout sessions and things coming up, so I'm excited to be connected, and feel free to reach out if you want to connect with me further.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Josh. I'm going to take off, and hope you enjoy the rest of your HDC and have a good rest of your week. All right.
You too. Bye-bye.